Welcome to Jobbed Out, the wrestling editorial that reminds you that you can always get a good deal if the price is right. In case anybody is new to the channel, I love talking about cool or unique moments in pro wrestling history. The underrated stuff, the forgotten undercard, the one-of-a-kind match stipulation. And while putting together a piece about a match that really nobody ever saw coming, that being the Invisible Man versus the Invisible Stan, I had the opportunity to sit down and chat with the maestro of that very match, current All Elite Wrestling referee Bryce Remsburg. The problem, if you can call it that, is that we just had too much fun shooting the shit about his career, his more hands-on than usual reffing style, and comedy's place in pro wrestling that it would be a shame to leave most of it on the cutting room floor. So, why would I? As a special bonus, here is the full chat between myself and Bryce Remsburg.
I appreciate you taking the time. What time zone are you in?
Oh, I'm on Mountain Time, so it's 7:30.
Okay, where do you, Denver?
Well, actually, I'm Canadian. So,
okay.
Edmonton, Alberta.
Oh my gosh, I've never been to any part of Western Canada. I'd love to go. I'd love to go sometime. I've only ever done Ontario and Quebec, but I've heard like British Columbia and parts of Alberta are lovely.
Oh, BC is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. Absolutely.
Martha Hart put over Alberta to me very hard and told me to come visit sometime. I don't know if she was being polite or she meant it, but she.
Well, she's from Calgary, and Calgary's a big tourist spot. Edmonton, we have oil and we have a mall, and that's pretty much Edmonton. Well, we had Chris Benoit, but we don't talk about that anymore.
That seems wise, I guess. Where's there like a big crazy, like maybe that's the mall? Is that Banff? There's like a water park or something.
You're thinking Edmonton, West Edmonton Mall with the big water park, and used to have a giant arcade and movie theater and all. The guys that bought Mall of America built ours.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Do you have summer there, or is it just perpetually winter?
You know what? Right now it's I mean, not that anyone would be able to tell from looking at me. I'm a polar bear. I'm a big fat guy. It's 30 Celsius right now. I think that's about
like 90
Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Hate it so much. Yeah, don't know if you saw any of my content, the format of how I do it. But I definitely want to get, expert analysis and expert opinion, and just fire some questions at you.
I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have. If there's a question that I feel some kind of way about, which I can't imagine what it would be, I will, answer creatively, and I won't, be a jerk or anything. I promise. Don't even worry about it. I'm
feel free if there's one you're like, you know what, cut that. Let me know.
I will. I don't anticipate that happening.
That's only happened twice. Told me to cut some stuff, and
I can't imagine what about.
It was a certain backstage personality. He's like, you know what? Don't want to speak about him.
All right, fair enough. Sorry you hated Todd Pettengill so much.
Right? The man, the myth, the mullet.
Right.
God, I miss that.
I met him when I was like 12, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
I've expressed it in my videos in the past. I want to sit down, have a steak dinner, and chat with him.
I would love that. I would love nothing more. One of the reasons I think I probably became referee is A, I'm a terrible athlete, and B, I was always infatuated with non-wrestling role people. The guy that chucked the beers to Austin, everything. But yeah.
Oh yeah, Mark Eaton.
Yeah. He lives like a half hour from me now, actually, in Central Pennsylvania. It's like Harrisburg, PA.
That's wicked. You would say it's almost a stone's throw away, but
a stone cold throw, he calls it.
There you go. There you go. Had to slip that in there. Not sponsored. So something I definitely got to say, because congratulations, you're coming close to your 20-year anniversary as a ref.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
How did you get started? Because there's lots of wrestling schools. There's even I remember wanting to go into reffing and ring announcing, and it's like tough. You got to bump. You got to learn to wrestle.
Yeah, sure. So I was a wrestling nerd since I was 8 years old. Which is 31 years at this point. And all the magazines, every time they would come to my local arena, then I started traveling for pay-per-views, and I got a driver's license at 16. I was driving to Philly and New York and DC and all these places. My dad took me to Starrcade 97 in Washington, DC, in 1997. And then I, refereed for Sting in Washington, D.C. in January 2022, which is crazy. And then I discovered independent wrestling, which is like, if you've if you're a fan of music and you only know U2, you're missing out on all these like cool local indie bands you've never heard of. So when I, would go to indie shows, there were no guardrails. I could walk up and touch the ropes. I'd get in the ring at intermission for $5 and do a Polaroid with King Kong Bundy. And that was like the coolest stuff in the world to me. So the two guys on indie shows that really stood out to me were these like cruiserweight type guys who were doing a much faster style. They're really obviously inspired by Rey Mysterio and Ultimo Dragon and Psychosis and all the luchadors of Nitro. Two guys by the name of Reckless Youth and Mike Quackenbush, neither of which are currently active anymore. And I just, follow these guys, buying their t-shirts, going to their AOL groups or whatever was the way to do that in 1998, 1999. And then in 2001, I graduated high school and I found out that a wrestling school was opening in Allentown, which is an hour away from me. And the head trainers were going to be Reckless Youth and Mike Quackenbush. And I was like, well, this is serendipity. I, don't want to be a wrestler, but I love these guys. And it's an hour from my house. And I just, started college. I'm kind of at a crossroads of my life. I'm 19 years old, so I went to the open house, and I was terrified that it was going to be all, I don't know, football players, big dumb jocks, super mega athletes. And it turns out it was comic book nerds and hardcore music punk kids, which I now, you may now know as Ultraman and Mr. Zero, and comic book nerds that were Icarus and Hollow Wicked. And then these New York guys came that were just wrestling fans. They know as Eddie Kingston and Jigsaw. And I realized, like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is, these are my people. I can do this. And maybe I can't be a wrestler, but I think I can be a referee. It was also half as expensive to train as a referee. So I started training, and I was in love. I was, I got to be in a wrestling ring. I got to sweat in a wrestling ring. I was learning how wrestling worked. And then 2 weeks after I started training, I started ring announcing. And 4 months later, I started refereeing. That was September of 2002. And like you said, coming up on 20 years, and I, the term overnight sensation is maybe not one that gets thrown around me a whole bunch. I was 17 years on the indies, making it as a hobby. And then, I got married, I had a child, and wrestling as a hobby was becoming a smaller piece of my time and my pie of my, I was doing maybe 1 or 2 shows a month. And then AEW opened and everything changed, and I quit my job and I joined the circus, and I, became the travel manager for AEW. I've been able to referee a lot of, main events and world title matches on pay-per-view, and I'm, living a dream I didn't know that I had. But yeah, 20 years later, here I am.
It's too cool. And yeah, you've worn a lot of hats. I was going to mention, the announcing, the commentating, Chikara, you got to do it all.
Yeah, I was essentially Mike's lieutenant for about 15 years, booking the referees, training the referees. I would help out at the school and work with the commentators backstage, and I would commentate myself. I'd ring announce sometimes. I would host event centers. I would go out and warm the crowds up. I would do all the travel for our adventures on the road, and all of this was a labor of love, but it all trained me and put all the tools in my toolbox in place to be, now I'm Sting's travel guy and Chris Jericho's travel guy and Tony Khan's travel guy. And these, I was picking up these tools along the way. I didn't realize that set me up for this, I don't call it a dream job because it's not a, dream I ever had, because I didn't think it was possible, but here I am. I'm very, very, very fortunate. Right place, right time. Very lucky to be nice to the right people on the way up. I've known Orange Cassidy for 15 or 16 years. I've known Eddie Kingston for 20 years. I've known Claudio for 18 years. These are my college buddies. These are the guys I came up with. These are the guys I traveled the roads with in 2004 and 5 and 6. And now I see them every week at work in a different city in a giant arena. Fortunate feels like an understatement.
Speaking of understatement, I don't think that referees get enough credit. I know that other than the indie refs who are just there to, count the pin, you look at the TV refs who have to make sure everybody's on cue and has their times. And there's a lot of people who do have to control the spots and, help get the flow of a match going, especially if things aren't going well.
Yeah, no, it's basically the job of I've used this analogy before, but it remains true. The refereeing on the indies for 17 years was getting my bachelor's degree. Refereeing in AEW is my master's degree. I learn something every week. There's a different thing to consider. There are earpieces, there are times, there are 12 cameras. It is just, many times it feels like you're sort of conducting an orchestra. You can't, grab the violin and make it play the notes you want, but you can strongly suggest it's time to play a certain note in a certain place, for example. And, when AEW started, it was a lot of these guys, the Bucks and Kenny, and, there were very few guys with TV experience. And I learned a lot from being in the ring with Jericho and Moxley, and then later Bryan and Adam Cole. These guys have done a lot of TV style matches. And it took me really like a year and a half or 2 years to feel like I got my confidence and my sea legs under me. And a lot of that, unfortunately, was refereeing during a global pandemic in a completely empty arena. When there are pretty low stakes, those were just reps. We were doing those dark tapings at 2 a.m. in Jacksonville every other week. And that was, a bond with a lot of those guys now, and really made me just, whatever it is, 10,000 hours of a thing to make you feel like you're a master at something. I'm definitely not a master of it yet, but I feel a lot more confident when we went back on the road in July of 2021 than I did before, when I had only, had 5 months of national TV experience. And like really a lot of us, referees, wrestlers, production guys, commentators. It was trial by fire. Dynamite started on October 2nd, 2019, and a lot of us had never done anything like that. And we just got pitched in the deep end to do our best. And in many ways, many of us succeeded. And in many ways, some took a little while, but we're figuring it out. And we are a much better oiled machine today than we were 3 years ago.
I cannot argue that. And somebody who's been watching, I've been watching wrestling since 1989.
So boy, man, that's crazy.
A lot. I enjoy Dynamite because it does give me a different type of. It's not just a case of it's a different coat of paint. It's just a different company running it. There's a lot of variety in that show. There's a segment meant for those who want a death match. There's those that want their mat technicians. There's lucha libre. There's
flashes of comedy.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's I like to refer to it as a smorgasbord, or a variety show like the Muppets, or a buffet, something for everyone. And it's run by, very obviously, not only a very huge singular wrestling fan in Tony, but many, many wrestling fans at the top of it. It's, there aren't a lot of, I can't think of one, corporate brain that is really steering the ship that isn't also a wrestling fan. So it's made by wrestling fans, made for wrestling fans. I think that's very obvious every Wednesday and Friday.
That's a big thing. Good plug, by the way. But that's a big thing that anyone who's experienced they're falling out of love with a job or a workplace. It usually comes from management or ownership not being passionate about it. The idea that the suits ruined radio, or
ask John Moxley about that. That's the guy who loves wrestling. He loves wrestling, and they just kind of, in many ways, I don't want to say beat it out of him, but sucked it out of him drop by drop. And he just, like, when he came to AEW with us, he was just breathing fresh air once again. And you see it in his matches, on his face, in his conversation. If you read his book, it's just that a passionate guy that loves wrestling.
I know we strayed away from the perfect segue a long time ago when you mentioned the orchestra, because the big reason for the season here is I want to talk to you about your maestro moment.
Oh my! I've told my wife to make sure they showed up at my funeral, because I think it is my opus, for better or worse.
Does it actually top the Tope con Giro? Because that made its rounds for years as well.
Yeah, that was more of a moment. This other thing was more of a full-on, I don't know what the orchestral term for a symphony or what, I don't know what it would be. So the flip dive was A, a little crooked, and B, only done once. But the for better or worse, I think the Invisible Man versus Invisible Stan match is going to follow me to my grave. So the thing fans yell during commercials at Dynamite pretty much every week.
Seriously?
In hotels, and people in airports sometimes will bring it up to me, and it's just like, this is the thing. In my, I guess it was either my third or fourth day at AEW before Dynamite even started, Tony Khan pulled me aside and told me he watched it and loved it. And I was just like, well, wow. And he is, I'm not sure that type of wrestling is his absolute favorite, but he, told me he watched the whole thing. He thought it was, brilliant and all these things, and I was, blushing and floating all the way for weeks and weeks off of that one interaction.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's another. It was several moments. It was probably 6 or 8 minutes worth of moments, but it was another right place, right time, right person. I don't know how to explain it, but
I was gonna ask if you had gone back and watched it. Unfortunately, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, "Nah, I never went back and watched my matches." Like,
I don't hardly ever do that, but until AEW started, and I realized I needed to become a better television referee. I need to go back and watch the matches, and like not as they were happening when I'm hearing this in my ear and this is happening, like have an out of body, skull session with it or whatever. So I have started watching that, and I haven't watched it recently. A couple times I have been with some non-wrestling friends, and not so much since the global pandemic started, but someone will hear about it or ask about it or want to watch it, or a cousin or something wants to watch it, and they will pull it up on their phone and start to watch it, and I end up watching some or all of it with them. But I have not. It is not a regular occurrence in my household, unfortunately. But yes, I have here and there. I have watched parts of it. Yes.
So for background, April 5th, 2019, GCW is hosting their 3rd annual Joey Janela's Spring Break. Smack dab in the middle of the card, Invisible Man versus his evil twin brother, Invisible Stan. There definitely was build for this because GCW even had put a release out a couple months earlier saying Invisible Man has died, and there was all this speculation on whether Stan was the one who killed him. Where did this idea come to be? Because I don't think you just, you were the ref that drew the straw and had to do this. Obviously, you orchestrated this. You had a lot to put together.
Yeah, the real brain children of this whole Invisible Man saga were Brett Lauderdale, who's the promoter of GCW, Joey Janela, who is he really brought the Invisible Man to prominence, and a guy by the name of Giancarlo DiTamo, who is a videographer who used to work for GCW. He worked for WWE for a while. Now he works for AEW. So I see him every week at work. He did a lot of those like montages and like the packages that you would see from GCW, like the music videos, whatever. He was the brainchild behind those. But Joey Janela really was the one that was really pushing to highlight the absurd. And I knew this was happening in, Joey's universe and the GCW universe. And I did a fair amount of GCW shows back then. I didn't travel with them whenever they were in Jersey or New York or around Philly. I did GCW shows on a regular basis back then. Spring Break 1 in Orlando was the Glacier match. Glacier and Ethan Page did like a karate standoff or a Mortal Kombat standoff or something. Spring Break 2 was PCO and Walter in New Orleans. And Spring Break 3 was in Jersey. And that was actually, I did 10 shows that weekend because I live so close to Jersey. So this Spring Break show was like show 6 of 10 for me in that weekend. And I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks in advance. They all still to this day communicate over Facebook Messenger. It was either Brett or Joey who was just like, we have this idea and we think you're the right guy to do this. And something I've always prided myself on is doing I always want to if there's ever an opportunity to referee a type of match I've never refereed before, I want to do it. If there's a 60-minute Ironman match, casting match, ladder match, inverted battle royal, best 7 out of 13 falls match, like whatever it is, I want to do all the weird. I want to like have the most eclectic wrestling referee resume of anyone in the history. And I don't know if I do.
Props on conquering that blood and guts fear of heights, by the way.
There you go. That was another one. That was like, do I want to climb up on this cage? Not particularly, but there's 3 minutes left in the TV show, and John Moxley's telling me, and Eddie and Claudia are all telling me to get my ass up here. So I guess I got to get my ass up here. The worst part, it was way worse to get down when the TV show was over and my adrenaline had died. Like I knew we were on live TV when I was climbing up to get up there. But then when it's over, it's like, well, the Dynamite's over. I just gotta get down now. And there are some fairly embarrassing fan cam videos of me terrifyingly getting down this thing. Moxley's also afraid of heights, so I feel like I'm in good company to a certain extent. But yeah, be the blood and guts referee, beat the referee that climbs top of the cage, like whatever. I would have the most crazy, eclectic, ridiculous wrestling referee resume of all time. And I don't know if I have it yet, but I think I'm maybe in the top 20 or 30. So this for me, I have a sketch comedy background too. I took a bunch of college classes in comedy, and as a improviser and a wrestling referee and a fan of the absurd, I was very excited about this challenge. I said, "Yeah, that sounds great," and then I realized I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. I agreed to this in principle, but I had no execution or concept of it.
Please tell me it wasn't called in the ring.
No, that would have been very, very difficult. So about a day or two before, I realized, like, oh man, I gotta start putting this together. And I, had a lot of GCW shows do not have a ton of direction, or it's not like these giant paragraphs of what you're gonna do. It's just like, go out here, you have this many minutes, maybe this person wins, do your best, have a good time. And so my first question was like, how long does this have to be? And that was a pretty open book. It was, however long you think you need to tell the story, just maybe it doesn't take 45 minutes. Well, it's like, it's not gonna take 45 minutes. Like in my mind, I felt like I only had 3 or 4 minutes of ideas. So the week before, I remember sitting at my old desk job that I had before AEW, and like starting to bat around ideas in my head, but not know if any of them are good. So I treated it kind of like what I imagine a stand-up comedian treats a stand-up comedy set like. This happens, and if this goes well, then we go to this, and if this goes well, then we go to this. If this goes bad, maybe we skip this and go right to this. So I kind of laid out chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, whatever, in this order. It starts in the ring, we go outside, it comes off the balcony, it comes back to the ring, we break the door, and that's the end. So that was really the cherry on top. When I got there that day, the GCW props guy was very, very proud of the fact that he had rigged up this door to break on command with a string underneath, and he was very excited. He came and found me as soon as I got that. He was so excited about this. I was like, well, that's the exclamation point. That's how this all ends, right? Like, what tops that?
Well, obviously 2 kickouts and a super kick.
Right, clearly. So I kind of laid out. I had maybe 8 or 10 beats in my mind. The starting, playing on the indie tropes of trading, and then going outside. I was very proud of the balcony idea, and then coming in, and then Kikutaro would be involved. Kikutaro, unfortunately, a side thing, there was a version of this where Kikutaro and I were going to wrestle in New York City a couple months after this. I was going to have a match with Kikutaro, and then he had some visa troubles, and then I got signed to AEW, and it never ended up happening. But I had never had an actual wrestling match, like a straight up one-on-one wrestling match, and I was, at that point, 35 or 36 years old, and a father of one. It's like, when am I ever going to do this? And Kikutaro seems like a guy who wasn't going to hurt me or drop me on my head or whatever. So this seems like a fun idea. I could do something with this.
Feels like never say never. I mean,
never say never.
Patrick, Earl Hebner, they got matched. I'm pretty sure Tim White had a match.
Never say never. Never say never. I'm not against the idea. So I found 2 people that day who I trust their wrestling brain and B, their comedy brain. And those 2 people were Orange Cassidy and Ethan Page, who, in a twist of irony, are both my coworkers at AEW now. But I remember sitting with them and just running through this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Okay. And maybe a little tweak here and there, maybe mess with the order or mess with the timing of something, but I felt like I had a pretty good thing. And then obviously the secret sauce in all this is the audience. It's, WrestleMania weekend, it's New York City, it's late at night, they're serving alcohol at the venue, everyone's having a good time and is relatively invested in this ridiculous Invisible Man storyline. So if I had gone out there and I'm doing all this ridiculous Shakespeare pantomiming nonsense and they're just sitting on their hands, we might have gone home pretty quick. It might have been a long 4 or 5 minutes for Bryce. But luckily, and this is a testament to GCW, they have a very passionate fan base. And this is the most passionate wrestling weekend of the whole year and one of the most passionate wrestling cities in the whole world, New York City. So the fact that they were along for the ride and reacting to everything, I remember getting out there and immediately feeling like, oh, I got this. And the last minute ad was the sunglasses. Was like, how can I see them? No one else can. So I remember talking to Joey an hour before we went out and being like, he was like, well, I'll give you my glasses. I'm like, yep, that's it. That's the last bit of this.
Bad boy vision.
I have bad boy vision. I can see them, and that makes it all make sense in this ridiculous, preposterous ecosystem. And I remember, explaining to the commentators, one of which was Dave Prazak, who's, a legend, an indie wrestling Hall of Famer, a guy I've looked up to for many, many, many years. Gave me the first guy that ever bought me a plane ticket in wrestling for Shimmer was Dave Prazak. I've 20 years of respect for him. Was a commentator on this. Rich Palladino was the ring announcer. He's a hell of a ring announcer, a great dude. Been at 25 years. Just the stars were aligned for this all to work. But the crowd was the secret. The crowd was the one that made it. Them reacting to everything, going on along with me on this ridiculous journey, and then them in the room just being like there. And it's just that, of course, fed my adrenaline, and it's contagious. And I remember getting to the back when it was over, and I remember, like, I have decent instincts at this point. I was like, I think that went pretty well. Everybody was into it. I didn't cut anything. It went, 8 or so minutes, which is longer than I thought it was going to take. They were reacting. I was put in all the stuff I was going to put in. You might have even like stretched it out a little bit because it was going so well. That's the thing. I mean, whenever I have a spot or something to do in a match, it comes after someone else's thing, or it has to take a certain amount of time. I have to be bumped and lay down for this long, or I can only hold a chainsaw for 5 seconds because we have to go to commercial, or whatever the reasoning is. But on this night at the White Eagle Hall in Jersey City, it was all me. So I could make it take as long or as little as I wanted to. And like, I'm not used to that control, and it's unnerving in many ways. Like it's terrifying. And, beholden, I'm my own master, and it's scary. And that's, one of the reasons I was a sketch comedian, not a stand-up comedian, because the stand-up, it's just you're by yourself. You have to trust it's all you. Sketch, you're with a group, and you fail as a group, you succeed as a group. But I remember getting to the back and seeing Orange Cassidy in the tunnel, because he was about to wrestle Taka Michinoku. That was the match after this. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Thanks a lot, man." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "I don't know how I'm going to follow that." And I was like, "Oh no." And Orange Cassidy is one of the most over comedy wrestlers, or whatever, most over wrestlers on the entire indies in 2019. And I was just like, "Oh no." And then someone, I forget who it was like, "Have you checked, because this was live streaming. It's like, have you checked, Twitter yet?" I was like, "No, I haven't looked at my phone yet." They're like, "You need to get on Twitter right now." And I was like, "Okay, am I in trouble? I thought I screwed up." And I went on Twitter, and it was just like overwhelming, ridiculous, effusive, like, of course there's a couple jerks that hated it, and that's fine. But it was just like, the most attention my mentions have ever gotten my entire life. It was just like hundreds and hundreds of just these ridiculous, overly kind things and gifts of things. And like, and then I went out, I guess maybe it was the next day, to sell merch, and I sold more merch than I've ever sold in my entire life. Dozens of t-shirts, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I remember coming back to my house after that weekend to explain to my wife how the weekend went. And I started crying because I was just trying to explain to her how well this thing went. And I had this giant wad of cash of merch money, which I'd never had in my life. And it was just, every superlative of everything, like the most critically acclaimed thing I've ever done, the most money I've ever made in a weekend, the most this, the most mentions, the most that. Like, it was just like far and away, it felt like the most successful and special thing I had ever done. And I was pretty convinced at that point I would ever do. AEW started right around this time, and I knew that I was going to Vegas for Double or Nothing in a couple weeks. And I remember Nick Jackson of the Young Bucks DMing me and saying, "We should make the story that you got hired for AEW because of this," which wasn't true. I was already booked, but it is a fun thing to tell people that, "Oh yeah, that's how I got booked for AEW, that Invisible Man match."
People like a referee who has control. How do you convey having control better than controlling two people that no one else can see?
The thing that I'm most proud of is when someone will say, "I showed it to my friend who hates wrestling and they loved it." I have a friend that, loves comedy or loves horror movies or loves absurd, ridiculous things, or is a burlesque dancer or a roller girl or a, I don't know, whatever, some kind of a circus performer, just ridiculous off the beaten path professions or hobbies. And, they're not a wrestling fan, but they loved this because it was so ridiculous. And that's, the nice thing.
It was really intricately done. It wasn't a case where just, a couple people went out and bumped around on a mattress fighting a pillow here. You focused a lot of details on the slugfest. You managed to part the room, the crowd for a balcony dive. You even put a lot of details in that an actual referee normally doesn't get credit for. We all know the black nitrile gloves at this point, but actually motioning along with the back and forth punches, doing the actual trading pinfalls, you very clearly wanted to show the actual skills of your craft instead of like, okay, I'm just gonna referee a couple guys that don't exist. No knock on them, they're both fantastic performers. I think Invisible Man's still active to this day.
I believe he's doing the Northwest Territories currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Yukon run.
Yeah. He's the champion of Nunavut.
There you go. So you do know your Canada. Well done. Granted, Chikara, PWG, Game Changer fans, they do embrace a lot of wild ideas. What would you have done? Would you have just been like, okay, we got to break the door fast if they're not buying it, if they're rebelling against it, if they're not in sync?
Yeah, I probably would have cut the entire going through the crowd, the balcony thing, because that took a lot of time. That was a big thing. I probably would have skipped that. We would have gone right to the end, and I would have, put my head in my hands.
Bodies. I think every ref working the show showed up to die or not.
I remember actively recruiting people in the crowd and backstage, being like, I need you, this, and like lining, explaining exactly what I wanted to all these people. I do remember that. Some refs that they weren't even on the show, they were just because there's WrestleMania weekend, there's always extra people backstage, and it was either the next day or either earlier that day or the next day, I helped produce Orange Cassidy Does a Show or whatever. It was like a theme Orange Cassidy event. Okay. Like 2 or 3 weeks in advance, someone was supposed to do a show and they dropped out, and this hole came open, and Orange Cassidy and a guy by the name of Jerry Durling, who owns IWTV, and the three of us kind of put this show together in 2 weeks' notice on our own, just with people that were around or ideas that we had or people that we thought we needed to do it. Giving some of our friends some work. Ultraman just wrestled Nick Gage in a Christmas death match, whatever. There was a 7 out of 13 falls match. There was a dodgeball match. There was a 1-minute time limit match with Chuck Taylor versus Trent, which I'm very proud of. Theater of the Absurd continued on that weekend, and just the fact that was the same weekend as the Invisible Man match is kind of mind blowing.
I'm going to be a little worried here because I don't know how Zoom works, but it looks like it's going to threaten to kick me off in 3 minutes. So
oh no,
I don't know what's going to happen there. If it does, I apologize. I guess I'll just fire a couple randoms at you. Sure. First and foremost, who's your favorite referee of all time, and why is it Aubrey Edwards?
Aubrey's probably number 2 after Mark Curtis, who is a WCW Nitro guy. I did a lot of the cruiserweight matches. A lot of my, reactions are maybe inspired by him. And I'm also a Tommy Young guy. He would, give it back to the guys. He would shove Flair back, and I've, done Tommy Young spots with MJF and Bryan Danielson, which are like exactly what those are for. But yes, those are my guys.
I was gonna say I couldn't have imagined Brian Hildebrand taking a cup of tea from Emi Sakura and having a sip.
Don't get to show my comedy chops often in AEW, so that was a delight.
What would you say? Because and this one's kind of a big picture kind of thing. So sorry, but there are established refs do have their kind of signatures. Earl Hebner is the god of the dramatic slow 3 count.
Yeah.
You got Charles Robinson. No one can run to the ring in a mad dash and slide in for a count like Robinson. Yeah. Jimmy Cordera's the 45-second 10 count.
And the guy who makes internet videos to say how much he hates AW.
Well, what would you say would be your I don't know if it's like a legacy thing, a Remsburg special?
Thinking about a legacy makes me very uncomfortable because I don't think I'm anywhere in the same conversation with all these people, anywhere even close. I think I'm like 7 classes below Charles Robinson and Earl Hebner, but it's probably the overreactions and the drama and the doing my best to when some people are saying that I am overselling or whatever, I'm trying to do my part to get the match over and get the guys over and sell what a crazy move this is and what a crazy thing I've just seen. That's really my intention when I do stuff like that. So I don't know if that's a legacy, but that is, I guess that's the thing that's most closely associated with my style or whatever. But I don't I don't think about this that much. I'm sorry. I'm not good at talking about myself.
No worries. They can still find your merch on AEW Shop. Bryce is right t-shirt though.
That's true.
And there you have it. A huge thank you to Bryce once again for sitting down and having a chat with me. It was a phenomenal time, and my only regret was using Zoom because the damn thing actually kicked us out before we could say goodbye. But I do want to ask you, what do you think of Bryce Remsburg's interactive style when it comes to reffing? Do you prefer wrestlers to include referees and ringside personnel in matches, or do you feel it can distract or take away from the focus? What's your most memorable Remsburg reffing moment? And do you have any questions for Bryce should we ever sit down and have a chat again? Let me know what you think in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more, because I want you to be a part of this conversation too. For now though, I better get my shoulders off the mat, so thank you for tuning in to Jobbed Out. I'll catch you next time.